George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Dr. Rochele Royster is here with us today. She is a professor at Syracuse University and in art therapy in the Department of Creative Arts Therapy. And we have a lot to get to on just how she uses art therapy in so many creative ways, not only, as you would think, art therapy, but just what is art therapy, right? But she's also an artist, which I'm pleased to find out. So I want to understand her discipline. And not only is she an artist, she's a fiber artist as well. At least I'm giving you that, okay? So I would love to know a lot more about it. But our connection to Dr. Rochele Royster, who now has given me the permission to call her Rochele, is part of the Martin Luther King Jr. dinner celebration, which is encompassing now an art area where we get to see the works of local artists. And we'll learn a little bit more about her role in that in just a few moments as an artist who participated in this in just the last year. 40 years of the MLK celebration dinner. And I can tell you, Rochele, I think I've been to most of them. So it's been quite the journey. And we've had some of the biggest names and now you. And so welcome to the program. And so let's start with a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you came upon this particular discipline.
Yeah, it's so nice to sit with you and have this conversation. So I'm really excited. Um, yeah, so I grew up in Virginia. I was born in DC. Both my parents were educators. They taught
Mm.
in DC public schools, and I lived maybe about an hour and a half from DC, in a very rural country town. So I grew up very much on a farm with woods, finding things in the forest and making things and that type of thing. But I was very much connected to the classroom, education, but also because they worked in DC to the museums.
Mm.
So we went to the Smithsonian, and I had all of this kind of inspiration coming from my parents who were public school teachers, but also from the museums and also from the country. So yeah, that was my childhood, I would say. As I uh, was in around high school, I started getting more and more into art. And what I really loved about art was that I was a very shy kid. So I had a hard time talking to people. But when I pulled out my art pad or when I pulled out my drawings, I was able to connect to people in a way that wasn't so stressful for me. So really, looking back now, I was using my art work and my art practice as a way of connecting and engaging with my environment, but also with the people around me. When I graduated from high school, I ended up studying, becoming a studio major at Virginia State University. And VSU is a historically Black
I was going to
college.
say, is it an HBU? Yeah, HBCU. Yes, go BSU. Go ahead.
Yes, VSU, yes. So, which is also in Virginia, Petersburg, Virginia. And there, it was just a really great experience. A lot of my teachers were students of artists from the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm telling my
Mm.
age a little bit there, but a lot of my professors were actually students of artists who were of the Harlem Renaissance. So it was an
Drop some
amazing.
names for us. Drop some names.
So a painting teacher I had, Charles Flynn, was actually a student of Charles White, who was a teacher at Hampton University. And Charles White, if you look him up, he's an amazing artist. He does a lot of figurative work. And so the way that he created figures and used art as not only as a way of expressing, but as a way of giving, almost like as a way of talking about what's happening.
Mm,
what's happening in the world, but
sure.
also what's happening from the Black experience, which was amazing to see, and it was just amazing to have that history taught to me through my professors. So anyway, I was there at VSU, and I was a studio art major. Now, mind you, I told you my parents are teachers. So after I graduated, I had ideas of, just living that artist life. Now, my parents were like, okay, no, well, you got to live a life that's going to pay your bills.
Okay.
And so they said, why don't you consider going back to school and getting a teaching certificate? Um, and I ended up getting a master's in special education. I started
Hmm.
off in library science, actually,
Hmm. Hmm.
and met a mentor, Dr. Charlotte Orange, who just really shaped the way that I was looking at the classroom, but also how um, special education. And meeting diverse learners and how they're learning, how art can be used to transform classrooms, and also how that creativity can be used to teach reading, teach social studies, teach math. And I fell in love with that. I was like,
Mm.
this is what I want to do. I want to create the type of classrooms that I might not have had as a student, right? How
Right.
can I create a classroom that is inclusive, that is transformative, that pays attention to all those things? When I got into the classroom, because after I graduated, I started substituting. I realized there were so many things going on with these kids
Oh
that
yeah.
I couldn't teach. How can I teach Johnny how to read and write when Johnny hasn't eaten? Or,
Right.
Johnny's parents were fighting all night
Or
long.
or
Or
or Johnny had to dodge some bullets on the way to
that
school. All of that, right?
all of that. And I was like, you know what? I don't have the tools to do this. And so I found out about art therapy. And I questioned why every school didn't have an art therapist. We need to be addressing and nurturing the social and emotional intelligence of our children. Because if you can't regulate yourself, if you are in constant chaos, there's no way you're going to be able to do all the other things they're asking these kids to do. And so that's when I left Virginia, went to Chicago to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and got my master's in art therapy. Um, and you asked, what is art therapy?
And that was my next question, right? And I really want to understand because you said that as a youngster, it was a way for you to connect and be social. So I really want to understand how it is used and even how you, not knowing that that's what it was back then, how did you use that artistically? So let's talk about what is art therapy.
Yeah. So art therapy, if you think about just therapy and counseling, most of the time you're using some type of talk therapy. So you're
Hmm.
sitting down and you're talking to a therapist, you're setting goals and that type of thing. With art therapy, you're doing all of that, but you're also using the art as a way of addressing either trauma, or as a way of focusing or calming yourself, or almost as a form of meditation, even.
Hmm.
And so different people might have different goals, but ultimately you're really using your artistic expression. You're using art as a way of understanding. And you don't have to be an artist.
That
Uh,
was my next question.
you don't have to be an artist. You really just have to be someone who is interested in that type of expression. So art therapy is used a lot with children. It's used a lot with people who might have experienced some type of trauma, but they don't have the words to talk about it.
Hmm.
But they might be able to draw a picture about it. And so that helps in trying to heal.
Let me just reintroduce you. Dr. Rochele Royster is joining us as an assistant professor of art therapy in the Department of Creative Arts Therapy at Syracuse University. Part of the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, there will be art. There will be an art exhibit. They will get to that in just a moment because that's why we're talking. But we're really trying to understand the work that she does and her discipline because she did her PhD in this area. So your PhD is in community psychology, but it's using the art as therapy. So let me ask you then. So we're in a conversation, right? And so what would you say to me? So George, can you draw how you feel inside about how that thing made you feel? Is that what you would say or something to that effect? How would
It
it might? Okay.
might. It might. And it really depends on where you're at. So it could be something like, instead of you telling me how you're feeling, it's like draw what it feels like to be in your body today. You
Mm-hmm.
know? And if you're saying, I'm in a lot of pain, a lot of stuff going on, and then it's like, okay, show me what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can kind of talk about, okay, what's going on? Why did you use this color? Um, why did you choose to scribble versus draw a person, And so then the conversation begins. But also it can be more, say, if you have someone who is isolated or depressed, and maybe what they really need to do is to find a connection to others. So you might have a group therapy where you have a group of people who might be working on the same thing. Maybe they've all lost a parent, or maybe there's some type of domestic violence situation, or maybe they've lost someone to gun violence. You're having a group, and you're using art as a way of expression, as a way of getting to know each other, but really any type of
Gloria Kilpatrick.
when you're creating, you want me to
Oh,
continue?
no, no, no.
Okay. When you're creating art, your brain actually releases a hormone
Mm,
that makes you feel good. So it's almost like the same type of hormone that is released when you're eating chocolate or
mm.
after you work out.
Right, right.
And so when you automatically get into these groups or in these sessions where you're doing something and you're creating something, it makes you feel good. And
Mm.
so yeah. And so that is uh art therapy. And it can look different ways with different people and different situations.
And so some of the situations that I understand in your dissertation, right? You use art-based, you call it art-based social change, and you talk about working work. Tell me about that work and the different ways that you used art therapy in situations that we might not, it may not come to mind, or that we may not think of it being used in that way, especially around how it affects us as Black folk.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what I ended up doing once I graduated from got my art therapy degree, I went back to the classroom because that's really where I felt at home. And so
Hmm.
I was creating a classroom, a special ed classroom, where we were addressing traumas, but
Hmm.
also reading and writing and that type of thing. Trauma-informed classroom is what we were kind of calling it later. Um, and so when I was in the classroom, and let's fast forward like 13 years after teaching in Chicago public schools, I had a student that was shot and killed. And
Mm.
at the time, I was getting my degree, my PhD in community psychology at National Louis in Chicago, but I was also working with the Museum of Contemporary Art. I was in a teacher institute, and the purpose of this teacher institute was to create some type of art project that actually um, had some type of civic engagement. And so the people who were your students who were creating art, they were supposed to be creating around some type of civic issue that they were experiencing. And I was teaching on the south side of Chicago, and in this area, um, gentrification was happening. And so I was thinking, okay, let's do a quilting project where I have kids come and people from elders from the city come in or from that area come in and tell their story, and we archive these stories and things like that. But I was working with middle school students, and they looked at me like, quilt, one, what is a quilt?
Right.
And then why would we spend all this time making quilt when I can go to Target and buy a blanket?
Right, right, right.
And I was like, okay, I understand y'all. I get it. Like, it's this project is more about me than it is about you. And so I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do when this happened. Um,
Hmm.
a student who was really a big personality, life of the school, um, was shot and killed. And the school, what do you do? What do you do when you got to come in the next day and you got an empty chair, you know, and it's testing and people are saying, continue on with your day, but if you need, to talk to someone, there's one person for 500 kids.
Yeah.
And so I went into the classroom and I said, I got to hit pause on this because we need to process. We need to talk about this and process it. And so I made space for my students. I had about 13 in my homeroom at that time.
Hmm.
We have a morning meeting where I do a check-in with everybody. And so this morning meeting, everybody knew the student Keon had been shot. And it was during the time of when Laquan McDonald was
Mm.
had been shot, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray.
All,
So
all of that was going on. Yeah.
all of that was going on. And the kids were like, oh my gosh, now it's right here. And these are students who grew
Hmm.
up where, at night people are shooting,
Hmm.
they're aware of gun violence. They know they're street savvy. And so it was just a lot. And I had all these quilting materials. And I remember talking to the kids and I was taking care of myself, really. I started making, uh, like wrapping the fabric with the yarn. As a child, I used to make these little dolls. And I think
Hmm.
just inadvertently, I started doing that. And the kids, while we're talking and processing, they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I guess I'm making a doll. And they said, can we make a doll for Keon? And I was like,
Mm.
yes, we should make a doll for Keon. That's an amazing idea. And someone else said, well, let's look up the news report. And when they looked up the news report, of course, it was one paragraph, it was no name. At the end, it said like gang affiliated. And everyone was like, Keon wasn't in a gang. It's
Mm.
like, what? All of these people are dying in vain and we don't know their names, we don't know who they are. Every person in that classroom had someone very close to them that had been
Mm.
shot by gun violence. And so while they were making a doll for Keon, someone said, well, can I make a doll for my uncle? He was shot.
Hmm.
Someone else said, can I make a doll for my auntie? She was shot. Um,
Mm.
and at that moment, I was like, whoa. So this is not just something that I'm sitting with and having a hard, difficult time with, but these are babies. These are students who are really struggling with what to do next. How
Mm.
do I do with it? What do I do with this? And so eventually we started making dolls for everybody who
Mm.
had been shot and killed. And at that time, shot and killed that year. And at that time, it was about 442 people who had been shot um,
Mm.
and died. After about, I would say, the 45th doll, this group of kids, and mind you, it was like 13 of them. What I started noticing is that they were taking the dolls in these peace circles. I called them peace circles, where we would create these things. And they started doing them in their kitchens. They started
Mm.
doing it in the lunchroom. I would see them doing it out on the playground. And so they were taking these peace circles and creating this community care for themselves and
Mm.
also for their family members. And then they were bringing me back the dolls. Um, And then they soon got tired of doing that. After about the 45th doll, they're like, okay, we're good. And what happened next is that teachers started hearing about the project, and teachers came to me and was like, I had 10 kids that were shot last year. Can you come to my school? Can you do these peace circles in my school? And at first I was doing that. And then I was like, well, I have a full-time job and a family, and I don't have time to do this. And so that became my dissertation. My dissertation was building these doll kits, creating a protocol of how to do a peace circle, and mailing those out and getting those out to the teachers so that they could learn how to facilitate these peace circles in their classrooms. And not only that, they could get a leader, a student leader, who could go and facilitate these in their churches and in their homes and wherever they needed it. And so after the second year, I would say the second year in, we built a memorial.
Mm.
And the memorial was housed at Hyde Park Art Center in Chicago. And a lot of different organizations got involved. Pastors were really great in Chicago. They got involved. Black Lives Matter, Mad Moms got involved, really, because this gun violence was just rocking us. It was like, we
Yes.
got to do something. Like, there's no reason why we should be afraid to sit in our house, and afraid a bullet is going to come through the window, and it wasn't just the typical, it was everywhere. These things, it was happening even in your little middle class neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
um, so so yeah, people got together and we demanded things. And so it wasn't just build this like memorial, and we need action. And so high school students came out, they did performances, and there was a call to action. We wanted more mental health and wellness programs in the schools. They wanted more art programs, and they wanted a trauma center.
Mm.
The trauma center at the time had been shut down by the mayor, Rahm Emanuel. And what was happening, people were getting shot on the South Side, being um, transported all the way to another trauma center on the other side of town, and they were dying on their way there. And
Mm.
so of course, it makes sense. Have a trauma center where the trauma is happening. And so the energy of not only the doll making and the art making, but also the energy around the kids talking, at their churches, talking in their communities, grandmas coming in and, helping out. The energy was like, we're demanding this. We want this. The art brought attention to the pastors. The art brought the attention to the politicians, to the organizers. And within the following year, a trauma center did open. And so what I have to say about that is that it's not just one person that can do it alone, right? We have to do it collectively together. And when we empower each other, then we can see uh, the strength that we have in numbers. And so that's really this project really emphasized that. One doll, but 1,500 dolls together can really make an impact. Just as one person, we make an impact, but with a whole community, we can make an even louder voice and a louder impact. So that's an example of how
Mm-hmm.
art can engage communities, how art can be the voice of change, but also build upon like the strengths that we have, and then just using that to propel ourselves forward, so that we're not feeling like we don't have a choice. Oh, we don't know what to do.
And so when we talk about art therapy, are we talking about the pen on the paper art therapy? Well, no, because you just talked to me about doll making, but I'm asking, does this art therapy include the whole spectrum of the arts, visual, performing, dance, or is it, or specifically, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's the whole
The
spectrum,
whole
right?
spectrum. Okay.
Yep. Yep. So it can, people specialize in different things. But some people are more visual. Some people, like I have a quilting background. I use a lot of quilting and weaving in my practice. Some people are more drama. So using
Mm.
performance and improv as a way of dealing with those things. But yes, singing, there's music therapy. So all of these things, if you think about, if you think about those things that just give you, so much joy and energy, that's singing together, right? That's
Mm.
drumming together, that's dancing together.
Yes, yes, yes.
All of that is forms of expression that makes you feel good. It's art, and we use all of those things in art therapy.
Well, I'm fascinated in that I'm not sure that you thought you would end up in on this path in doing it in the way that you ended up doing it. It sounds to me, as I'm listening to you, that you stumbled upon it. And am I fair to think that way or not?
Hmm, good question. Um, I would say that I tend to follow the path. I'm open to different, I'm very curious, right? And so I always knew I was an artist, and I always had developed skills as an artist. But thinking that I was going to be an art therapist, it just kind of like came about. And then once I
Mhm.
was in it, I was like, oh, this
Of
is it. This
course.
is the
Yeah.
journey. This is the journey. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm just always open to getting that inspiration of where I need to be.
All right. One more question, and we promise that we'll get to the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, January 26th, and what you're going to do there. You talked about the in your work trauma informed classroom and inclusive disability, including race and other aspects. And you also mentioned that when you first went into the classroom, there was so much going on, and you needed to specialize. And I think about what teachers are experiencing now, and is there room in their way they teach to have a trauma informed classroom that's inclusive right in the moment because of the other objectives that they have in the classroom? I wonder if that's even possible.
You know what? I have so much respect for teachers who show up every day in the public school system, because it is a really, really, really difficult job.
Right.
It's a hard job. And you have all of these expectations. You have all of this kind of top down, what they're expecting you to do. And then in your core as a teacher, you know what the kids need, right?
Hmm.
But you're being pulled in all these different directions. So it is really difficult, especially in terms of standardized testing and grades and all the expectations around that. Um, and just not knowing. Art therapy is a new field,
Mm.
but I feel very strongly that almost every school needs to have at least one art therapist. And so part of what um, my practice involves, and part of my plan really, is to advocate for that. We need art therapists in the schools. Our babies are
But just
really,
one, though?
no,
Just
well, no, we need
right.
more than
But
one
to start, right, right, right,
to
right, right,
start.
right.
To start.
And
And
that's not necessarily the art teacher, or is it?
no, it's different.
Right.
Because the art teacher is going to teach art skills. The art
Mm.
therapist is really in tune to the social emotional and the academic, and the social emotional impacts the academic, right?
Hmm.
Impacts the behavior, impacts all these things. So when we're
Hmm.
complaining about kids, oh, they don't know how to sit down. They don't, they're doing this, they're fighting, they're doing that. Those are behaviors. Those are behaviors that are caused by a larger root problem, right?
Mm.
We're not addressing these root problems. A lot of times, those root problems are rooted in poverty, or rooted in racism, rooted in all being coming from an under-resourced environment. These are all issues that we're not paying attention to. Instead of, we're just saying, oh, Johnny's bad. He
Mm.
sit down. He can't read. He can't do that. He needs more. The teacher's a problem. He needs more teaching. The teacher's
Mm-hmm.
not doing their job, but we're not looking at those social determinants that are
Mm.
really impacting these kids or
Yeah.
these people or their parents even, you know?
Yeah.
And so yeah.
And the protective factors. All right, let's talk about two more things. Uh, your recent move, what does that mean? You moved somewhere?
Oh, so I'm new here. I'm new
Uh,
here in Syracuse.
uh-huh.
I've been in Chicago for about since 2000, so 25
Yes.
years.
Yes,
I
yes.
moved to Syracuse 3 years ago to teach at SU. And so it's been a really interesting time learning as a community psychologist, learning about the community of Syracuse. And one of the things that I really wanted to do when I came here was figure out, okay, so what did the communities do before I got here, even how did they take care of themselves? And so I
Mm.
I started doing my research. I started looking at like Harriet Tubman. I'm like, oh, Harriet Tubman is from this area. She lived in this area.
Sarah
Sarah
Logan?
Fisher. Yes, I was like,
Yes.
what? All of these strong Black women who were here, who were doing the work. And so I wanted to look at what they did and see how we can look at those models and apply to
Mm.
how we do community here now. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's what that big move is about.
And what is the moving art quilt?
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So the moving art quilt is kind of like my pet project. So as in the art committee group for MLK, we
Yes.
decided we really wanted the community to be part of this MLK celebration. A lot of times SU is kind of like that school on the hill that nobody really gets to, or if you're in the community, you kind of know SU, but you might not go down on the campus, right? So how can we engage community through the art and get them really involved and their voice heard during this MLK celebration? And so the idea that was kind of curated and collected was, well, let's have school kids participate. Let's have the elderly kind of participate in this community quilt. And the community quilt, because I wanted to twist it a little bit, became this kind of walking jacket that is going to have this grand community quilt piece behind it. And so we have King Elementary participating. We have Brighton Middle
Academy.
School Academy participating. We have the Dunbar, all of these organizations participating and creating these I call them freedom patches, because what I want people to think about is what does freedom mean to you? What
Mm.
does it mean to be free? And so we've been having a lot of great conversations around freedom means being able to live in a safe space, being able to live in a place where I don't feel scared. It means getting a good education. It means, being able to express myself without hurting others. And so it's really created a lot of conversations about that. But of course, people also talk about MLK because of the way that he carried himself and his teachings. He talked all about freedom, but he was such a person who gave his life for his convictions and for the freedom of others and himself. And so really, how do we celebrate him and also during this time now where um it's such a kind of no one knows what's going to happen. How do we build community around our strengths, really, and take care of each other during this time? So that's what this quilt is. Once it's at MLK, it will then travel to the different schools and the organizations, and we'll continue adding on to it, continue writing our story about what freedom is.
It reminds me of, in some ways, about the AIDS quilt that people did back in the day. Yeah, when we think about community, so is there a point to have it displayed somewhere, or we're just going to keep? or will it be a football field size thing at some point, or
You know what? I'm gonna go with the flow with well, whatever it
whatever
is,
you right now?
whatever it is.
The schools are participating in. Do you want other community participation? Do you want the fiber artists in the community to add a
Yes.
patch or something like that? Is that something you would like?
Yes, yes. So this is definitely a call to anyone who would like to participate in this. If you want a patch, you can reach out and I can get you the materials. Maybe you can link my contact information in.
We
Um,
will.
and it will be a traveling. We're going to Community Folk Arts Center. It will be displayed there. Beecham Library. I think we'll go after that. And it's going to continue to move and facilitate like these conversations, who we are and how do we protect our freedoms and what are the freedoms that we have that we love and that we want to keep.
And just the art of quilting as a form of storytelling, and the stories that end up in our quilts and what that means to us are just fascinating, and it's carrying forward. It's a way of bringing the traditions forward.
Mm, I love that. Yes. So I was taught to quilt by my great grandmother.
Mm.
She was a farmer in North Carolina and she taught me how to quilt. And yeah, I see it definitely like that. My fiber artwork is really, really carrying her ancestral knowledge forward, right? And then
Hmm.
of course the history behind quilting in the African American community is quite important.
Right, right. Uh, you can see right part of the Underground Railroad,
Yep.
right, and so okay. So now MLK, what's happening at the Dome for MLK with the art community?
Yes. So MLK, you said you've been to that celebration. It is an amazing celebration. I mean, the food, I was amazed. The food is so good. The food was good. The speakers were great. So the art piece that we're doing this year there will be the jacket, the community quilt jacket will be there. There will be models who will be modeling it. And also, people will be able to create a freedom patch right there at the celebration and
Mm.
add it on to add it on to this living history, really, that we will be creating together collectively.
And the art will be part of the dinner this year. It won't be separate. Let's talk about that.
Yes, so it will be, I like to call it, George, a happening. It's an
Okay.
art happening.
All right.
And so yes, we're gonna have models who are wearing the jacket and kind of going around and explaining what the significance of the jacket, but we'll also have art patches there, freedom patches there for participants to we have fabric markers to paint and draw on and then add on to the quilt as we make it. Um, so that will be happening. Also, it will be huge on the Jumbotron, or is it Jumbotron? I think the large screen where they
That's as
show.
good as a definition as any.
So we'll be showing pictures of the quilt patches, but also how of the community making the quilt patches. And so that will be lovely to see. And also, hopefully, we'll have some of these organizations and artists who have participated also there at the dinner. And so it will be an art happening for anyone who would like to be part of this community art piece. Definitely reach out and or come to the MLK dinner to participate.
Which will be Sunday, January 26th at the JMA Wireless Stone. Tickets they're going fast at mlk.syr.edu. Dr. Rochele Royster joined us. She's an assistant professor at the School of Visual and Performing Arts, Department of Creative Arts Therapy, and we've learned about her work not only as an art therapist, but as a community psychologist, but more importantly, her storytelling and healing, and how that's impacting our community. And for that, we want to thank you, and we look forward to what your team is creating for us at the MLK dinner. Get your tickets, mlk.syr.edu is how you get your tickets. And we'll have Rochele's contact information for those who want to contribute to the community moving quilt, but also come to the dinner, and you can also be part of living history in real time.
That's right.
Rochele, is there anything else you want us to know about this event? Anything else you want to share about your work before we go?
I would just say check out Community Folk Arts Center. It really is a pillar in the community. It has such great history. And right now there is an exhibit up that I curated on Black women history in Syracuse and on community care pedagogy. Check that out. And the quilt will be there during the Black History Month in February, and they have great programming as well. So I definitely support our local cultural institutions.
Community Folk Arts Center located 805 East Genesee Street in Syracuse, that connection between town and gown, making it real. All right, the MLK dinner, once again, January 26th. We're looking forward to seeing Dr. Rochele Royster there and the crew making history in real time. George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation. Thank you so much.